first of all, thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate it. Sharon and I were really excited to put this together. And so we're going to talk about antiques and how to use them in your homes today. And I'm assuming you're all here because you have a love for antiques, just like Cheryl and myself. But I want to talk about, I guess, thinking of things differently and how to incorporate them into your homes. Even if your home is on the newer side or on the modern, contemporary side, how you can still make that work. The whole idea is like, oh, well, I can't have an antique item in my home unless my house itself is considered antique. I don't subscribe to that at all. We've always had older homes, and so of course, yes, that probably lends a little bit more naturally, but as a designer, I work with clients all the time, and of course, a lot of those homes are newer, and I just love the character and the soul of bringing in an antique item, especially if it's an item that's been handed down and that they own. As a designer, when you go in sometimes to people's homes, the first thing they'll say is, well, this was my grandmother's, but maybe because we're redoing this room, it's not going to fit or it's not going to work. And I'm the first to say, oh, yes, it will. We're keeping it. And they're usually always like, really? I get to keep it? And I'm like, oh, yeah, we're keeping it. And I get really excited about that. So we're going to jump in and we're going to talk about that. And guys, if you have any need to get up, get a drink, or get something to eat, I don't mind if you walk around. I'm going to be walking around because I love to be able to show examples of, as I'm talking, of how you could use a certain piece or a certain thing. So I'll tell you a little bit about me. We're going to talk about why we should be mixing old and new in our homes today, how to repurpose with intention, using pieces, especially vintage items, and there's so many things here, as unexpected home decor. Like, I know a lot of people, they think, oh, I need an accessory, or I need something for that shelf or something for that table, and they think, oh, well, let's go to HomeSense. Well, we know that item that we're going to buy at HomeSense is going to have very little meaning to us, right? So I love to use antique items in unexpected ways with my home decor. I'm going to talk about giving utilitarian pieces purpose. So using something that may have been meant or intended for a certain purpose when it was created and built 100 years ago, but using it differently today, and I love to do that. And then we're going to talk about storage, because I don't care how new your home is, we always need more storage. And I want us to think about that differently and think about, again, how we can use a piece that is antique and use it in a new way. So a little bit about me. I am a designer, stylist, and a vintage antique enthusiast. I've been helping clients for, well, my son's going to be 19 tomorrow, and that's as long as I've been a decorator designer. I made the decision when I got pregnant with him and we started having a family that I didn't want to do the corporate thing anymore, and I've always loved design. I was the university student who spent time DIYing her apartment when I probably should have been studying. Just being honest. So I love mixing and blending old and new, and so that's just going to be a little bit about me. So why should we mix old and new? And I have my notes here to keep me on task, because I can go down the rabbit hole for sure. So why we should mix old and new? Well, for one thing, older pieces, and if you look around the shop here, all the different wood tones that we have, it definitely adds warmth, texture, and let's not forget personality, because when you bring in an antique piece, you know your neighbor, your friend's not going to have that same piece. That's going to be unique to you and unique to your space. It also helps create depth, and you're bringing history into your space, and that's when I talk about that character and bringing in that soul. And then, of course, sustainability and mindful consumption. So using antiques and thrift shopping and vintage finds, that is the original idea behind the whole recycle and repurpose, right? Is to keep items out of the landfill, give them new life. So antique furniture. Let's talk about antique furniture and the purposes that they can bring in. So this is actually a project that I worked on up here in the valley a couple of years ago. It was a farmhouse. I mean, I couldn't share all the photos with you, but it was a rundown farmhouse, and we breathed new life into that space. And so the kitchen and the main living area, you would not know it's in an under 100-year-old house, But what we did is we maintained some of the items that we took out of it and repurposed them. So this was one big solid door, and I had the carpenter split it down to half, strip it of the paint, and that became the doors to the butler's pantry. So the butler's pantry is all nice and new, but then you have these vintage doors. So we did that. So that's a way to think of how to repurpose an old door, for example. One thing I love to do is to take an old dresser or server buffet and reuse it or repurpose it, as a bathroom vanity. I think in a bathroom where you have a lot of tile, a lot of hard surfaces, that using a piece like that as a vanity. Now, of course, it has to function. It's not just about bringing in an old piece, but it has to function. So, of course, it has to have the right dimensions in order for it to work. So you'd obviously want a piece that has the depth to accommodate a sink. You'd want to make sure it's the right height, so when you're standing there and brushing your teeth, this thing is not too low. So yeah, you want to make sure form meets function, and that's just a design principle that I try to live by. So in this case, you can see this bathroom is pretty much all white, but the depth of the wood tone in that buffet is just absolutely stunning. And with a piece like that, it's very easy actually to take a dresser and a server or a buffet and turn it into a vanity, because you just need to cut out for the plumbing. So if it's something that has a center drawer or cabinet door, it's very easy to accommodate that, and to top it with a piece of quartz, absolutely beautiful. What other pieces? So I love dressers. I have a thing about dressers. Ask my husband. I will see a dresser on the side of the road, and it's like, we have to stop. We need the dresser. And he's finally said, we do not need any more dressers. I have no more space for dressers. But think of a dresser as a great way to capture all that catch-all in a front entry. At the top of your stairs in a hallway. The dresser is not just for storing clothes. You could use a dresser to store your puzzles, your board games, your craft supplies. I have all three. It's great in an entryway instead of a console table, which a console table, yeah, they're fine, but they don't provide you any storage. They're just for you to throw your keys on. So I love to use dressers for that. Think of kitchen island. In all the homes that I've had personally, I've never had a kitchen island that is a bunch of cabinet boxes put together and you put a counter on top of it. A kitchen island, you can use an antique baker's table as an island. An old farm table can be a great option for an island. So just think outside the box. So if you've got a brand new kitchen, adding in that vintage antique item just brings in that character, that soul, and that warmth. And again, you'd want to make sure, of course, for the height. Okay, yes, and then, of course, the nice thing when you're bringing in these items to, especially an older table or a hutch or baker's table into your kitchen, it's already scuffed. It already has the patina, so it's going to be able to withstand the messiness of everyday life. And that's what I love about them as well. They're not too precious. So then, unexpected home decor. So antiques, of course, doesn't have to be the large pieces of furniture that I just talked about. You can bring in antique pieces in a very creative way that will add charm. So one thing that I like to think of is, we have to decorate, we have shelving. And this vignette right here, no, you're not in the way, not at all, no. Small piece of vintage artwork with some vintage books. That would look fabulous, not just on a dresser, but on a shelf. So if you have built-ins, for example, around a fireplace, or you have shelving in your office, using antique items like that for decor is a fabulous idea. And again, it will have some meaning. So I've just shared some pictures here on the screen. So there's a couple of people that come to mind when I am surfing the web or surfing social, which we all are guilty of doing. And one lady that does it really, really well is Marion of Miss Mustard Seed. I'm sure you guys have probably all heard of her. She's a collector. Now, I'm not a collector. Marion is a collector. And so, but all her decor is pretty much vintage antique items that she has collected over time. So, she's got the vintage books, she's got the stoneware, And so we've got some pictures back here, for example, that brings to mind, and so little knickknacks and stuff. And so again, it just brings a sense of charm, and it's an opportunity to have a conversation about something. Because, you know, yes, I'm not giving Home Sense a bad rap because they have their place, but you know, you go out and you buy a tchotchke from Home Sense or Winners and you put it on the shelf. It's not really going to capture anyone's attention. It's not going to evoke, you know, conversation, and it's not really going to mean anything to you. So, so I love to use items. So some items that I like to use, here Layla from the Lettered Cottage, she's another lady that does use vintage items as decor. So like you think like little dishes, we're like, none of us drank maybe our tea or coffee from a little cup and saucer anymore, right? I mean, I think it has charm, and I like the idea of it, but let's face it, we all want our big cups of coffee and tea nowadays. But little teacups and saucers, I feel they still have a place, because how charming are they, like on your bedside table for you to put your rings or your bracelets at the end of a day. I love it for that. A saucer makes a great little soap dish next to your sink. And the books, you need candlesticks. Like I would rather have a pair of silver candlesticks or brass candlesticks for candles rather than something, you know, that I just picked up at any old store. I love the idea of using framed prints, like smaller pieces, like pictures and what have you, again on shelving in your kitchen, behind a lamp, on your counter. In your hallways, think about using older mirrors. You know, yes, a lot of the older mirrors have the wavy glass and stuff, so you wouldn't want a mirror that you're necessarily going to be, you know, putting makeup on or tweezing your eyebrows to. But in a hallway, a mirror can help bounce light. And again, if it has a beautiful gilded frame, it's a beautiful focal point. So I love the idea of using mirrors, artwork. Think of bowls. Think of, oh, this item here, I have one by my sink, so when I spied this here this morning, you think of it, using it to put your brushes and your dish brushes and your scrubbies and whatnot next to your sink. This would look so much better with your, instead of just having the thing just laid there on the sink. You know, on a table, this vintage book, these actually work. I've looked through them. These are fantastic. I mean, how cute is that on a tray on a coffee table, for example? So just to give you some ideas of how you can use the little antique knickknacks as decor. Now, let's talk about giving these pieces new purpose. So I don't like clutter. And those of you who know me well know I do not like clutter. So if I'm going to have a piece on display, it's because it has to serve some purpose for me. And for me, like again, talking about my kitchen sink, I have my brushes in this, but then, you know, your dish soap, I don't like seeing the Dawn dish soap sitting next to the sink. I do not like it. But I know we don't always want to reach down to the cupboard every time we need to have a little dish soap. So put your dish soap in a nice little bottle with the pump on top. Then it can sit out. You don't always have to go looking for the dish soap. So, you know, an old mason jar with the pump works great. Here is an example of where they took a very, what I would consider a very feminine looking chandelier, and they took antique barrel hoops and put it around the chandelier, and now it gives you more of a rustic elegance sort of vibe. Here I love weights. I love the scales, and of course we don't necessarily need to be using scales so much, but here the scale is next to the sink and it becomes now a little plant stand. Little stools. I love little stools because the little stools are great again for plant stands, but putting one next to your tub, if you're like to have like baths and you like to relax, you can have your book there, you can have your glass of wine there, you can have a little candle, and you know, it's just perfect. Just perfect. And so antiques for storage. So armoires, I love an armoire. Love an armoire. Oh. So, and I love to use them to store my linen. So instead of a linen closet, I love to use an armoire for my blankets, my linens, and I love vintage linens. And we're going to talk about that one in a minute. I've talked about dressers. I love using dressers. You can use a dresser in almost any room in your home. The china cabinets, I know everyone's saying, we don't need china cabinets anymore. We don't have fancy dishes. We don't have formal living rooms. But a china cabinet, like this one here, which is a stunner, this would look beautiful in a bathroom. to store your towels, baskets, your lotions, your soaps. You could have a basket for the TP in it. So think again of using that in a different way. So I love the idea of a piece like this in a bathroom. The dark wood would just be stunning. This piece over here, the smaller piece, this would look just as beautiful as well. And so just think about new ways to provide storage for yourself. And here's an example of an older table with just a classic white kitchen. I mean, that is classic. But again, it allows you to combine function with beauty. And then, oh, linens, my next thing. I have a thing for linens. So wool blankets, wool throws, vintage linens. You remember back in the day, and I'm probably dating myself, you would get pillowcases given to, not in our marriage and our wedding, we didn't get them given, they got handed down. But I know when my mom got married, for example, the pillowcases they were gifted were embroidered on the end. Oh my God, they're just beautiful. Why don't we get that today? Someone needs to pick up embroidery. So like vintage pillowcases, vintage quilts. I have a number of old wool blankets that my grandmother would have purchased from Eaton's back in the day. And so this was actually my daughter's bed when she was 12, 13. And this is actually a guest bedroom that I designed for a client, and she had a ton of vintage linens as well. And this bed here that Cheryl is just serendipitous because I didn't know she had this here. This bed here, you know, with the French linens and the antique quilt folded up. So I love that. So I know not everyone likes wool, and this guy here is one of them. He doesn't like wool. He finds it itchy. I love a wool blanket. I would rather watch a movie on a winter night have a wool blanket over me than an acrylic one. To each their own. But I like wool blankets because I will put it over the back of the sofa. So if you have a sofa that is floating in the room and no one likes to walk into a room and see the back of the sofa, take a wool blanket and put it over the back of the sofa. And if your back cushion's detached, you don't have to have it over the cushions itself. And so I love to use wool blankets. That way at the foot of the bed is another way, draped over the arm of a chair is another way that I like to use them. But I love my quilts, and thank God my daughter still does this too, because she has a vintage quilt on her bed right now. So yeah, it just again brings pattern, and you know that they're made really well as well. Okay, so that's vintage linens. Tablecloths, older tablecloths. Repurpose those. They can be cafe curtains, which is having a moment right now. I think cafe curtains are just absolutely beautiful. You can repurpose them into pillows. They can even be shower curtains, because it's so hard to find a really good shower curtain because they're all too short. They're all 72 inches long, but if you can find like a really nice tablecloth, you can actually repurpose that into a beautiful shower curtain. Granted that you have a liner with it. So yes, think about, and vintage napkins. We have some monogrammed napkins here. Like, use the good stuff. A vintage napkin is much nicer to put across your lap than a paper napkin, right? Like, use the nice cloth napkins. And vintage makes it even that much better. And then dishware. So we have some beautiful spoons here. So like if you love to collect the silver, or you have silver dishware, silver cutlery, use it because it's so much nicer and it has a nicer weight in your hand. And you can use even the antique china or the vintage china with your everyday dishes as well. So here, for example, this was actually a small set that we got from my husband's grandparents, and we mixed that with our everyday white dishes because I like my white dishes, of course, because everything looks good on a white dish, but it looks even that much better when you take an antique plate or bowl and mix and match. So think about new ways to use the fine china. So the next time someone says to you, hey, I got this set of fine china, don't just say no, because you can use it today. Mix it in with your modern dishes, and it makes a beautiful tablescape. Platters, if you're doing charcuterie, everyone loves their charcuterie. Instead of using like the wooden board, use vintage platters to put your charcuterie on. That will just look absolutely stunning as well. And then here is an example. Pitchers, antique pitchers are great for vases, and then collecting your larger utensils that you probably have next to your stove. that makes a great crock. Talking about crocks, you know the big crocks you have with the number on them, the 4 and the 5. Those are fantastic. You can use those as planters. You can use them as, for us, we have a fairly big front entry area for an older home, but there is 0 storage. Like there is no closets in this space, so we have 2 crocks underneath this round table, and that is wintertime, it's the mittens and the scarves and the hats going there. Summertime, if summer ever gets here, it's where the flip-flops and the sandals are. So think again of new ways to use something. I have a butter churn, it's probably this high, and I have a fake olive tree that I put in the butter churn in the corner in a room. So that is quite a beautiful way to, again, reuse those crocks. The smaller crocks look beautiful for taking your utensils and what have you. So again, mix and match, use it every day. I don't prescribe to the idea that we have to wait for a special occasion to use the nice things.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
So like the crock with the number 2 on it
Yeah.
there, I have one of those in my kitchen, and what I've done is all of my linen tea towels I've rolled up
And put them in.
and put them in, so they're just there at the ready.
They're there.
But it's just so pretty.
It is so pretty.
Yeah, so it's another thing to do with the crock.
Perfect, thank you. So yes, utilitarian items. Think of new ways to use them for the everyday. I love that idea. So for me, if it's going to be out, it has to be pretty, right? So like the dish soap and the dish brushes, they have to be out because I am not digging out to the cabinet underneath to get those every time I need them. So I have them sitting out. Think of using, a plate or a little saucer or a little dish as a catch-all, for the change at the front door, or for the soap by the sink and what have you. And so vintage art. Oh, I love art. I even like the color by number. I think like in a little boy's bedroom, all the color by numbers, if you take all those and you put them together, and don't just think gallery wall, think if bookcases and a cabinet like this and a piece of art leaning up against the back would be stunning. So how do we take vintage art? Because okay, Marsha, you don't want a gallery wall that's just a mismatch, but as long as the frames themselves are similar in color, they can work. You could take, in this case, all of these prints or artwork, sorry, not prints, all the artwork are landscapes. So that way there's a common theme. The frames aren't all the same, definitely not, but the artwork. So if you have a common theme in either the frame itself or the actual subject matter of the artwork, then it will work together. You can also take new art that you've bought, maybe you have bought a print, and put it in an old frame. So that works just as well. And again, you're just creating that visual interest, and it's a story. You're creating a story. That's what our homes are. It's a reflection of the people who live in them, kind of thing. Okay, vintage art. So final thoughts. It all comes down to, it's all about the mix. We need our modern conveniences, modern homes. We have our modern, likes and dislikes. But we have to mix in, or we should be mixing in, those items that tell a story, that has some meaning to us, that's been handed down to us. Or if you like going antique shopping, it's okay to pick up those items. And just think of different ways to use them. So as you can see throughout the store, Cheryl has made a ton of pillows from vintage fabrics, for example. You can easily do that, whip that up. Think of, the china cabinet that nobody wants, reusing that in a different way. Just because it's a china cabinet doesn't mean it has to store china. Dressers, tables, like end tables, side tables. If you need a console table or a piece for behind a sofa or what have you, or in a hallway, like that narrow table there would work great in that kind of situation. Baskets, love baskets. Talking about dishes, one thing I forgot to mention, plates. I love a plate ball. I love a plate ball. So if you have a bunch of, for example, even blue and white or the red and white plates, They look stunning hung together, but they don't all, again, have to match in color. They could be a floral. So just think about the story that you want to tell and then use them. And with the plates, I tend to hang my plates, we'll just use like some sort of a glue with a little hook on them, but you can get the plate racks too to affix them to the wall. So this is just some examples again of things that I've done. So this was a dresser that a friend of mine will recognize because I made her go with me to buy it. It was from my son's room, and it was actually a retired professor from Acadia. And this desk was heavy, and I refinished it. My son's favorite color at the time was green. And so we refinished it. Now I don't paint all furniture, but in this case, his room definitely had like a Ralph Lauren feel going on to it. He would not know who that was. But I painted the dresser green, desk, and I love that. Here's an older chair in a master bedroom that we designed for a client, and so we had it reupholstered in a more modern pattern fabric. This is an old door. So as you can tell, I love using doors in different ways. So this was an old door that we added some trim to, and it became a headboard in a guest bedroom. And as you can see, she's got some of her vintage linens there. And then this was a brand new kitchen that we designed. We built in the window seat, but the table and chairs were quite older. I wouldn't maybe say they were so much as antique, but definitely on the vintage side. And we refinished them, kind of thing. So even though the kitchen itself was brand new, I did say to the homeowner, you know what, we need to get new table and chairs too. Definitely not. We refinished those. So that's just some ways that I have, over the years, taken older items and brought them into the homes that I've designed, because I do love just the soul. Because I think a home definitely has soul, and the older pieces allow us to bring that in. So that's my little talk today. If you have any questions for me, design, decor related, anything at all, I am going to be here. We have lots of nibbles, so please enjoy the nibbles and the drinks. I know some of you drove a bit of a ways. And I want to thank you all for coming out. And we do have a little gift for you guys for coming today. So I'll give these out before I forget.